We open to Neelix bothering first Tuvok and then B'Elanna, trying to learn more about their respective roles. He says he wants to be more useful around the ship, though that's currently manifesting itself by getting in the way. Janeway then to the rescue by calling him to the bridge. We found a big purple cloud that flashes, and Janeway thinks it looks a touch dodgy. Neelix tells us he thinks it's a thing called the Necrit Expanse, but there's not much more known about it. Janeway tells him they'll be counting on any data he can provide, and he looks distinctly uneasy at the prospect, so I guess this is the episode where we spell it out for everybody that he's not going to be the knowledge MacGuffin anymore. There's a trading outpost at the border of the Expanse, governed by a curmudgeonly Git who tells them he gets final say on any potential transaction conducted on his station, as well as a cut of the profits. Fair enough, says Janeway, as we don't have much of a choice. She, Chakotay, Paris and Neelix pop over for a look around. The place itself resembles a run-down sci-fi bazaar, a bit like how Deep Space Nine would look if it was mixed with RoboCop's Detroit. Chakotay and Paris are browsing the stalls when one eagle-eyed trader, who we'll be referring to as Smiler, clocks them as a pair of marks and swoops in for the kill. He says he can't help them find the reversible Sedgwick that they're looking for or whatever, but he can sell them some real good drugs. We decline and move on.
Winners don't use drugs.
Neelix is at a stall offering navigational data. He wants a map of the Expanse, but they don't exist because the place is so fluid that one would be obsolete before it was finished. He's disappointed, but quickly forgets about it when an old friend of his called Wix comes over and says hi. They retire to a bar to catch up, and Neelix tells him about how he's on a fancy ship now and respected by those around him, which is a generous interpretation of his relationship with the crew, but I imagine having a dubious grasp of reality makes it easier to wear those suits. Wix has had a rather less successful time of things, especially after he got caught during that nebulously dodgy thing he and Neelix did back in the day. He's struggled to make ends meet since, but believes this next trade will turn things around, and I'm sure this mention of a trade is entirely unrelated to our other plot thread. The downturn in spirits gives Neelix a chance to confide in Wix about how he's worried his usefulness on Voyager is coming to an end. But maybe Wix can help with that, and Neelix asks him if he knows anything about a map, apparently forgetting the conversation he just had about how that's impossible. We're in the mess hall with the distracted Neelix, and this new guy who's been given a talking part and a name, so he's probably being lined up for something important. Given the fact that every other incidental character with lines except Ensign Mum and Lieutenant Bastard is now very dead, he might want to lock himself in his quarters. We'll call him Ensign Conspicuous. Chakotay visits and brings Neelix's old pal Wix, who he's less than overjoyed to see. Wix was able to find that reversible Sedgwick they wanted earlier, so Chakotay brought him on board to thank him. He leaves them to catch up, again, and Neelix ushers Ensign Conspicuous out too. Neelix seems to suspect that the Sedgwick may have been obtained via means outside of normal procurement channels. Wix reassures him that he'd never do that, all but confirming that he totally did that. Oh, and he's also located something Janeway was looking for without success, and, more importantly, found the impossible map. The map's being held by a completely above-board doctor who'll give it to him when he delivers some completely above-board medical supplies that aren't drugs. All he needs is a shuttle to put the medical supplies on. Oh, and don't tell anybody about it. This is because he doesn't want Station Boss to take his cut, and not because it's drugs. In conclusion, drugs.
Winners don't use drugs.
Neelix somewhat reluctantly agrees, because even he can tell that this is all about as honest as a slogan on the side of a bus. We're returning from a freighter, having picked up the definitely medical supplies. There's a little back and forth over how Neelix doesn't like keeping the truth from the people on Voyager, but Wix twists the guilt knob to make him shut up. After all, there's nothing dodgy about this, and to prove it, we'll make this completely legitimate trade by teleporting onto the most unused corridor of the outpost. Oh, and we're taking a gun. After all, medical supplies are valuable. We teleport over and meet Wix's contact. Good news, everybody! Smiler was a doctor all along. What a relief. He checks the medical supplies to make sure they're very medical, and then says he's going to fetch their payment. There's a bit of confusion though, as it looks like some practical joker has replaced his wallet with a gun. His finger slips and he accidentally poops some blue at Wix, who poops some friendly yellow back. Things are getting a touch out of hand, and those practical jokers show up to grab the medical supplies from Neelix. Wix and Neelix seem to think this roughhousing has all gone a bit too far and decide to hide on the shuttle while the station boss plays some music that sounds a lot like an alarm. Back on the shuttle, Wix reveals that the medical supplies might also have had other uses, such as getting smashed completely out of your fucking head. Neelix takes the news poorly and wants to tell everything to Janeway, until Wix reminds him that this may not reflect well on him at a time when he's worried about his position on the ship. Add in a drop of guilt from the nebulously dodgy thing he mentioned before, and Neelix agrees to stay quiet in exchange for never seeing Wix again. There's a problem though, as keeping it quiet may no longer be an option. Janeway calls him into a meeting with the bridge crew and the station boss. Smiler is dead, and the station boss knows he was killed with a Federation gun because he did some science to prove it. Naturally, we'll be giving our full cooperation. Which is why Tuvok is interviewing everyone, including Neelix. He wants to know how a Federation weapon was used in the killing and is trying to rule out all possibilities, such as visitors to the ship like Wix having grabbed one while he was here. I'd comment on the lax security required for that to be possible, but we already learnt in the last episode that Voyager apparently has a designated engineering gun, so maybe they give them out to guests as souvenirs. Either way, Tuvok wants Neelix to be present when Wix is questioned, so over to the station we go. He feigns ignorance, saying he was in the presence of at least one other person at all times when he was on Voyager, and that he was asleep when the shooting happened. Tuvok leaves but asks Neelix to see him when he returns to the ship. Sounds ominous, but Neelix has bigger problems. Wix tells him he was only acting as a middleman for the transaction, and now the people he was working for are going to super-murder them for getting ripped off. At least, they will super-murder them if they don't get some of Voyager's warp plasma as repayment. Oh, and Wix has already told them Neelix will do it. Neelix is looking for advice and chooses Paris, which is precisely the sort of sound judgment that got him into this mess. He asks about how Paris got into trouble before and ended up in prison. Long story short, he says, is that he didn't tell the truth. To err is human, or Talaxian in this case, but how we deal with those mistakes is one of the things that defines who we are. Neelix is still on the fence though, and passes up an opportunity to tell Paris what's wrong. Instead, he visits engineering, where Ensign Conspicuous is being conspicuous again. After a little chat where we establish that yes, Voyager is great, and yes, all the people on it are great too, Neelix pops into the Jeffries tubes under the guise of wanting to acclimatise himself to them. I'd have thought he's had enough of them after the last episode, but I guess it's difficult to take notes when you're being chased by buzz monsters. He finds an access panel ready to grab that warp plasma he needs, then we cut away before seeing if he goes through with it. Which, we learn, he doesn't. He tells Wix that he couldn't betray the trust of the crew, causing Wix to lament their impending murder. But it's fine, because Neelix has a plan. Before he can elaborate, there's a bit of a kerfuffle in the marketplace as Station Boss arrests Chakotay and Paris. You see, he explains to Janeway, they were recorded talking to Smiler before he got murdered. Quite why he's trying to solve it himself when he's in the presence of a master, I'm not sure, but even he has to admit it's not exactly a watertight case. It's a good enough reason to arrest and question them, though. Neelix and Wix see Tuvok and Janeway leaving in a bit of a huff, and Neelix decides he's had his fill. He's going to confess to Station Boss. If he agrees to the plan, they can still make all this right. Despite significant concerns, Wix agrees. Station Boss is threatening them with 50 years in carbonite, despite seeming to accept that the killing was self-defense. Drug trading isn't permitted on his outpost, and he won't stand for it. Except, that's clearly failing, isn't it, explains Neelix. Drug trading is happening on his outpost. Every day, in fact. If only there was someone who could capture those responsible for the supply, perhaps in exchange for certain crimes being overlooked. Station Boss feels he doesn't have much to lose, as they'll probably get killed in the process, and agrees, whilst also providing them with a supply of shit-quality warp plasma to use as bait by pretending it's from Voyager. Neelix and Wix are waiting in the room where Smiler got killed, which doesn't feel like the most inconspicuous place anymore, but then I'm not a smuggler. They're being watched by Station Boss, but not for long as they disappear off the camera. Looks like someone's playing silly buggers. The drug gang arrives and we make the exchange. Drug gang leader scans the plasma and calls bullshit before pulling a gun, but Neelix warns him off using it. You see, he left the plasma canister slightly open, and if anyone fires a gun, it'll explode. Or tries to teleport out for that matter, so they might as well give up, which is Station Boss's cue to turn up and try to arrest them. One of the gang fancies his chances and fires, with fire being quite the appropriate descriptor, as the plasma ignites and roasts him before detonating the entire area. Neelix wakes up in sickbay. The doc tells us he got proper fucked up by the plasma fire, but he's okay now, so not to worry about it. In fact, everyone except the bellend who pulled a gun is alive, so it wasn't really that dangerous after all. Wicks got his shuttle and buggered off, and Chakotay and Tom were released, so that's nice too. Janeway arrives and tells everybody to get out, which is a bit harsh given that the Doctor doesn't have any quarters he can go to because she wouldn't give him any, but she's the captain, so he goes into his office and covers his ears or something. She's terribly disappointed. The lies, the crimes, the betrayal of trust. What could be so important to him that he'd burn all of those bridges pursuing it? He tells her about the attempt to find a map and the underlying belief that his usefulness is coming to an end. He also tells her he's willing to leave as soon as he's able, but she cuts him off. He's family now, and family don't get to walk away from their mistakes. He'll be scrubbing filters while he thinks about what he's done and how he can avoid doing it again during his future on the ship. Neelix leaves, suppressing a smile, delighted at having been given a shit job to do as we fly away. We saw in the last episode that Neelix's knowledge of the region has become less and less useful as we move into areas that he doesn't know, so this is a nice little continuation of him trying to find another niche to fill beyond his current role of giving the crew gastrointestinal problems. The moral, if one was intended, is perhaps that we should not define ourselves by what we mean to others. It would have been nice for Janeway to explain that his presence here goes beyond the services he can provide, but I'll grant you that may have been a bit overly saccharine. They are, after all, in a precarious long-term situation, and there are only so many hangers-on that you can support under such circumstances, so an element of expecting people to pull their weight is convincing world-building. The episode is also a rare opportunity to give some points to Ethan Phillips, who shows us again that he's a capable actor when given more to work with than comedy relief. He's quite compelling when he gets shouty, as we previously saw in Jetrel, and I wonder if the writers are deliberately using that juxtaposition to make it more impactful. End of episode.
Winners don't use drugs.